Meet our good-for-nothing hero, Mikio Kaga, who has all the reasons to be fed up with life. One day, he stumbles on a sketchy website where he builds an overpowered character for laughs. Next thing he knows, he's thrown into a game-like world with all his cheat codes activated. Now the nobody's a total beast, smashing enemies, stacking loot, and building a legendary harem. His chaotic, OP adventure starts now. Mikio wakes up in a strange world. The last thing he recalls being an odd online game he played in his tracksuit. A shimmering interface pops up, confirming his nightmare. He's not just in the game, he is the game. Scanning himself, Mikio discovers he's a level 1 thief. With no time to process, he grabs a badass sword and a ring of determination to boost his stats, realizing he's in a world with rules he needs to master fast. Stumbling into a quiet village, Mikio observes the locals, only to spot bandits raiding the place. Though hesitant, he sees this as his chance to level up. Armed with his sword and shaky confidence, he ambushes the bandits, his blade cutting through them like a hot knife through butter. It's bloody, brutal, and way too real for his comfort, but he pushes through. After an awkward yet victorious fight, he's left rattled but stronger. The village chief, Somara, thanks Mikio for saving them, offering him shelter and the bandits' loot. Among the spoils, Mikio finds a fake bandana, triggering a mystery Somara promises to solve. Mikio realizes this world is as dangerous as it is rewarding, and he's just getting started. To realize that there's no exit button, panic slaps him in the face as he mashes every option. But then the warning he ignored earlier comes back to haunt him. Once you're in, you're stuck unless you finish the game. Somara and a villager stroll up mid-crisis, pointing out his blood-soaked mess of a look. Talk about priorities. Mikio's left wondering if this is real life or just an extra hardcore tutorial. Either way, he's stuck, and the villager's constant bandit drama makes him question whether he's supposed to be their knight in grimy armor. When the bandana thief is busted, Mikio lets Somara handle the village's version of justice, which is harsher than a reality show elimination. The thief gets their ID marked, their social status nuked, and a one-way ticket to potential slavery. Mikio is not a fan of the system, but hey, not his circus, not his monkeys, at least not yet. The next day, Mikio hauls himself to Vale to sell the loot and snag some bounties. Enter Alan, a smooth-talking slave merchant who acts like Mikio is his new hero. At the trading post, Mikio finds out only 2 bandits had bounties, leaving him with a lighter coin purse than expected. Still, he pockets the reward and plays it cool, knowing this game's just getting warmed up, and so is his wild new life. While in Vale, Alan casually pitches his slave trading side hustle, leaving Mikio queasy. He tries to play it cool until he spots Roxan, a jaw-dropping beauty who steals the spotlight with her grace and elegance. Mikio doesn't want to buy a slave, but her piercing gaze sticks with him, sparking a storm of conflicted thoughts. Alan explains the grim reality of slavery in this world. No choices, no freedom, and escape is a death sentence. He adds that Roxanne's a top-tier pick, skilled, obedient, and worth every nar of her sky-high price. Normally 600,000 nars, Alan offers a friend discount at 422,800 nars, outfit included. Mikio balks at the sum but feels the pull to make her his. Alan gives him 5 days to scrape up the cash or risk losing Roxanne to another buyer. When Roxanne thanks Mikio for his interest, her soft words light a fire in him. With no plan and an empty wallet, Mikio walks away, determined to move heaven and earth to make her his. 10 years later, Mikio returns to the village where it all began, memories smacking him like a whirlwind. Things have changed, yet the vibe remains, tugging at him in ways he didn't expect. Now he's got Roxanne and a crew with him, but nostalgia makes him pause. He spots a black-haired kid named Mio, rare as hell in these parts, who shares a vague story about his dad dying before he was born. Something about Mio tugs at Mikio's chest, pulling him into his own memories. Without overthinking, Mikio hands Mio a sword. Not just any blade, but one that carries a silent promise: stay safe, kid. The boy hesitates but accepts. Roxanne gives Mikio a side-eye, but he brushes it off. Maybe it's karma, or maybe it's just instinct. Either way, the crew moves on, leaving echoes of the past behind. Back at the inn, Mikio stares at his stash, 33 gold coins. That's 330,000 nars, a far cry from the 400,000 he needs for Roxanne. His gut twists as Alan's get-rich-quick schemes replay in his head. The labyrinth in the West Forest could bring steady cash, but it's slow as hell, just enough to scrape by. On the other hand, bounty hunting promises quicker returns, but comes with serious heat. Flash too much cash and trouble will come knocking. Both options suck, but the clock's ticking. 5 days to make up the difference. Before he dives into the grind, Mikio handles some unfinished business. He remembers how risky it is to flash his overpowered sword, especially after beefing it up with 63 points. One slip up and someone could jack it, leaving him defenseless. He opens his settings and stashes the blade in his inventory. Out of sight, out of reach, and ready for the next grind in this chaotic new life. Mikio hits the market, aiming to snag a low-key weapon. He steps into an armory, appraised skill ready, and spots a scimitar with the rare skill slot. Jackpot. After confirming all scimitars are priced the same, he grabs it without hesitation, adds some protective gear, and heads straight for the labyrinth. On the way, he spots adventurers stepping out of a portal, likely teleportation magic, and easily locates the labyrinth entrance. Before diving in, he checks his combat stats, steals himself, and steps through the portal. Inside, Meikyo unlocks the Explorer class, a level 1 addition triggered by entering the labyrinth alongside his Hero class, which boosts his stats. He sets Hero as his secondary class and keeps Explorer as a backup. Exploring the labyrinth reveals a skill called Dungeon Walk. When activated, it opens a portal, allowing Meikyo to teleport to earlier spots in the dungeon, but only within its walls. The outside teleportation he saw earlier, that's a different beast. Armed with his sword, Meikyo soon encounters a level 1 needle tree. A quick slash ends it, leaving behind a branch he decides to keep. Another needle tree appears, and this time Meikyo tries the overwhelming skill. Time slows or speeds up for him, but the energy drain hits hard. Still, his sword's MP absorption saves him, letting him recover and finish the fight. After gathering branches, Meikyo heads to the guild. Using his increased sale value by 30% skill, he offloads his loot and earns 273 nars. Without the skill, it'd have been a measly 10 nars per branch. He does the math. Grinding 10 hours a day would only net 1,000 nars, not even close to the 70,000 he still needs for Roxan. The next morning, Meikyo leaves the inn in the pre-dawn darkness, feeling the weight of his challenge. With the transfer skill in his arsenal, he heads back to the labyrinth. The grind starts again. His MP drains fast, exhaustion kicks in, and frustration grows. The road to Roxan isn't just steep, it's brutal. While catching his breath, Meikyo levels up, not that it really changes his cash problem. As he explores deeper, he finds a hidden passage and thinks he's about to find something good. He spots something shiny, but it's just a busted sword. Before he can complain, the door slams shut and growls echo all around. Looks like he's walked right into a monster nest, and they're not exactly in a welcoming mood. Meikyo tries to use transfer to escape, but the skill doesn't work during combat. Now he's stuck, facing a bunch of monsters eager to tear him apart. He swings his sword for dear life, using his HP absorption to stay on his feet. Overwhelming clears a few, but the MP cost drains him fast. Somehow, he manages to kill them all, barely standing but still clutching his loot. When he leaves the labyrinth, he stumbles upon a crowd gathered around a body. Turns out it's a bandits, and people are talking about how the card attached to the bandit's arm doesn't disappear right away. That's when Meikyo gets the idea. He's going to risk his life anyway. He might as well make it worthwhile. With a determined look, he decides to hunt bandits, seeing it as the quickest route to getting the money he needs. Reasoning that bandits would want to keep low, Meikyo heads to the slums, where the city transforms into a red light district after dark. Despite the chaos around him, Mikyo's focus is razor sharp as he tracks down a bandit and follows him to their hideout. There are a lot of separate bandit gangs, so Meikyo stays in the shadows, observing their behavior to get a feel for how they operate. His landlord fills him in on the latest gossip. Apparently, bandits have been killing each other off ever since a big boss got taken out in a power grab. The bandits Meikyo previously wiped out were from a gang that had been ousted by the others. With less than 24 hours left to buy Roxan, Meikyo decides it's go time. He sneaks into the bandit hideout, silently taking out several of them while they're still snoring away. But when the rest of the gang catches on, Meikyo has no choice but to teleport into the labyrinth to escape. With their intelligence cards in hand, Meikyo cashes in the bounties, finally collecting enough money to buy Roxan. When he shows up to make the purchase, Roxan surprises him by apologizing for doubting he could pull it off. With the slave contract signed, she's content, and Meikyo breathes a sigh of relief. He's finally got her. With his extra cash, Meikyo upgrades to a fancier room, one that actually has a bed big enough for two. Roxan's looking all nervous, and Meikyo realizes he might have messed up. He accidentally got the double bed instead of two singles. He quickly reassures her, making it clear he's not planning on doing anything weird. Mostly, he just wants her to join him in the labyrinth as a fighter. After a shopping spree for all of Roxan's adventuring gear, including the obligatory underwear, they head back to their room. Roxan turns out to be pretty good at fixing and maintaining equipment, but things get weird as night falls. Meikyo can't stop sneaking peeks at Roxan, his hands betraying him as he touches her, but he feels like a total creep doing it. Still, they both power through the awkwardness, helping each other wash backs, scrub tails, and rinse out hair. Finally, they end up in bed together, and while Meikyo is doing his best to make sure Roxan's enjoying herself and not just feeling awkward as hell, they end up, well, you know. The next morning, Roxan gives him a kiss, but Meikyo can't shake the feeling it was more of a polite gesture than anything heartfelt. Either way, Meikyo pushes those thoughts aside. It's time to hit the labyrinth. Meikyo, still trying to level up his gear, turns to Roxan for advice on adding skills to his equipment. She tells him he'll need a rare monster skill crystal, which he'll then have to get a dwarf blacksmith to bond with the equipment. But of course, dwarves are sketchy at best, often about as trustworthy as a cat in a fish shop. So Meikyo decides it's time to recruit a dwarf he can actually trust and make them a party member. Meanwhile, inside the labyrinth, Mikio discovers that magic crystals can store monster magic, and when filled, they can be sold for an absurd amount of cash. The catch: it takes forever to fill them up once of work. Mikio grabs 2 empty crystals anyway, learning that they can hold magic from up to 1,000,000 monsters, though most people bail after filling just 100,000. He also finds out that the labyrinth isn't just some maze, it's a living entity that grows upwards. So the first floor is basically the basement. The strongest monsters are chilling up top, just waiting for unsuspecting adventurers to stumble into their jaws. Determined, Mikio decides he needs a spell or 2 that can take out multiple targets at once. They also figure out they need some healing spells, so both Mikio and Roxan end up getting the monk title by beating the crap out of a monster with their bare hands. Talk about old school. That night, they go through their usual routine, bathing each other, getting all cozy, and, well, making love. The next day, they head for the room of the first floor boss monster, ready to take it down and level up their game. After Mikio and Roxan wet the floor with the tree boss, Roxan picks up a medicinal leaf that somehow counts as a major victory and snags the title of herbalist. Mikio, not about to let Roxan have all the fun, decides he wants that title too. So they march back to floor 1 and take down the boss again, just for kicks. With his new herbalist title in hand, Mikio turns the leaf into health potions. Who needs to buy potions when you've got self-made healing magic? Back in the city, Mikio spots a sketchy bandit lurking around Alan's trading house. He figures Alan doesn't need any more special guests, so he gives him the heads up. Alan explains that the thief Mikio sold him got bought by a gang of sketchy guys. Apparently, the thief might have been in on the whole thing the entire time, probably biding his time to unlock the door and let the bandits in when everyone's snoring. Mikio's not about to let that happen. Roxanne's got some soft spots for Alan's other combat slaves, so Mikio offers to be Alan's personal bodyguard. Alan's either impressed or just doesn't know what else to do with him, but either way, the job's on. That night, after a very awkward but mostly relaxing time in bed, Mikio and Roxan head back to Alan's trading house. They team up with Alan's combat slaves, and it's a full-on ambush. The bandits didn't see that coming. The bandits fall into the trap like they've never seen a good setup in their lives. Mikio locks eyes with the thief, ready to make his move. He throws out some magic using equivalent exchange, and the thief's HP tanks faster than someone trying to escape paying the dinner bill. Alan, probably thinking the thief had a self-destruct orb strapped to his chest, acts like he's the one who saved the day. Mikio gets a reward for keeping the shop safe, though he's almost out of magic. He figures it's time to hit the labyrinth again. Inside, Mikio's feeling pretty smug as equivalent exchange unlocks the mage title. Time for some upgrades. He decides that next time he's getting a staff, but hold up, he stumbles into the second floor boss room and comes across a giant caterpillar, because that's what Mikio wanted to find in a dungeon full of death and destruction. But it's no match for Mikio and Roxan, and they squish it like it's a bad date. Moving on to the third floor, Mikio meets some kobolds. They try to play hard to get, but Mikio isn't in the mood. After clearing that mess up, Mikio decides it's time for a new adventure. He hires a mage to teleport him to Imperial City and then to Kuratar. He figures he'll get his teleportation skills on lock and be able to come and go as he pleases. No more paying for tickets, no more hassle. That night, Mikio and Roxan enjoy some much-needed downtime. He's already scheming about buying the house. This whole tavern life is getting old real quick, and he's ready to settle down, or at least get a place with better privacy. The next day, they're in Kuratar, and Mikio learns adventurers gotta pay to enter the labyrinth. But Roxan, cool as ever, gives him the lowdown. He can sneak in for free with a little teleportation trick. In Kuratar, Mikio buys a wand and starts hunting for a place to rent. He decides to move to a smaller village on the outskirts, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. With Roxanne's help, they find a big house near the labyrinth with a flushing toilet, even a garden, although it's a bit of a mess. They get a discount on the rent because of a weird stone room the last tenant left behind without permission. They head to the Veil Labyrinth for a bit, where Mikio uses his new wand to take out a monster. Back at the house, there's no furniture yet, so they crash in the first room they rented. The next day, Roxan gets busy preparing the house while Mikio heads back to Kuratar's labyrinth. He can't teleport in yet, so he has to pay to enter, then immediately teleports back home. Mikio's not impressed. Kuratar's labyrinth is way more crowded with knights and adventurers, meaning more competition for loot and monsters. Once their furniture finally arrives, Mikio and Roxan spend their first night in their new home, and it's everything they hoped for. Mikio finds out that, despite the crowding, no one's ever managed to clear the entire Kuratar labyrinth. The highest floor anyone's reached is the 91st, and that's a letdown for him. He's expecting a boss monster that'll blow his mind, but instead, he's stuck facing something that's about as threatening as a wet noodle. He and Roxan teleport back home, and after a mini pity party, they decide to put that neglected garden to work. While out shopping for a clothes washing tub, Mikio's mind goes straight to the gutter. An extra-large tub could make for one heck of an indoor bath in that stone room. As they keep pushing through higher floors, they hit a sweet spot where they can just teleport straight to the higher levels. No need to start from the bottom anymore, just straight to the action. But then things get spicy. Boss monsters stop playing around. They finally come up against one that's packing a punch and actually manages to hurt them with some insane magic. Mikio realizes he's been cruising a little too hard, thinking he could just breeze through it. The bathtub finally arrives, and Mikio is all proud of himself for introducing Roxan to the joys of bathing. Things go from scrubby to steamy real quick, especially when Mikio rolls out his soap invention. It's all fun and games until things get heated, and they end up making love in the tub. But as Roxan falls asleep afterward, Mikio can't shake the guilt over letting her get hurt by that last boss. Mikio figures out that clothing stores pay good money for monster rabbit skins, so he starts hunting them down. He and Roxan reach the 7th floor and come face to face with the Rapid Rabbit boss. It's not just a boss. This thing drops quality meat, which Roxan turns into a killer dinner. They decide to take it down again, but they run into another adventurer who's been stuck on the 6th floor for years, prepping to fight the same boss. Unfortunately, the Rapid Rabbit takes him out. Mikio can't shake the feeling of dread as reality hits him. Adventurers die in the labyrinth all the time, and one day, it could be him or Roxan. After a night of comforting, Roxan helps him snap out of his funk. They sell their rabbit skins, and Mikio buys silk camisoles for Roxan. Back on the 7th floor, a bull monster stabs Mikio in the finger, and while magic heals him, it's a stark reminder of how dangerous the labyrinth is. Later, while bathing together, Mikio decides to spice things up and introduces Roxan to oral sex. The next day, Roxan finds something big. A monster finally dropped a skill stone, the kind used by dwarven blacksmiths to add magic skills to equipment. Mikio decides it's time to write his last will and testament, making sure Roxan will be freed upon his death. But Roxan can't accept it. She sees his death as her failure, and if it ever comes to that, she'd rather die too. Mikio, still set on getting help from a master smith, visits Alan, hoping to purchase a dwarf slave with the right skills. Alan has only one dwarf slave, a 16-year-old named Sherry. Unfortunately, Sherry doesn't have the master smith job, nor is she suited for combat. Sherry reveals she has Explorer level 10, the usual requirement for the job, but it just hasn't appeared for her. Despite this, she sincerely asks Mikio to buy her. Roxan notices Sherry's thin ears, a sign of old age in dwarves, but Alan reassures Mikio it's just a birth defect and confirms Sherry is 16. To sweeten the deal, Alan lowers the asking price. Mikio buys Sherry, with Roxanne's approval, though it's unclear whether Roxan seems jealous or not. Mikio decides that Sherry will experiment with gaining multiple skills, hoping this will unlock her master smith job. He equips her with a club to start. Sherry is shocked by Mikio's magic abilities, especially his warp spell, and she's even more surprised that he treats slaves as equals rather than property. Sherry picks up a wooden club, and Mikio spots a skill slot on it. He's stunned that no one else can see it. During dinner, Mikio nearly surged Sherry first, but a death glare from Roxan makes him panic and serve her instead. Then Mikio gets a shock. While the Master Smith job is exclusive to dwarves, the only job exclusive to humans is Sex Maniac. Later, when it's bath time, Roxan shows Sherry how to clean Mikio using their melons. As they settle in for bed, Mikio messes up again by kissing Sherry first instead of Roxan. But with some fast thinking, he manages to spin it and kisses Roxan second, which she's cool with. By the end of the night, Mikio scores with Roxan for the first time, all while Sherry watches. Mikio takes extra care to ensure Sherry feels comfortable as he lays down on her. The next morning, Mikio discovers he's unlocked the Clap Maniac job. He's pretty stoked about the boost it gives to his stamina, intelligence, and magic. Feeling empowered by his new job, Mikio boldly announces his plan to form a harem. A time skip later, Mikio has acquired 3 more slaves: Miria, the Catkin, Vesta, a Dragonkin, and Rutina, the elf, and this is where our story ends.